Welcome everybody to Fellowship Games, Dakota here, and today we have the long-awaited debut of our first MTG video. We're going to be looking at EDH guide for the Scarab God. So the Scarab God is 1 blue, 1 black, and 3 generic. For a 5/5 at the beginning of our upkeep, each opponent loses X life and we scry X, where X is the number of zombies we control. And we can internalize for 2 blue-black, exile target card from a graveyard, create a copy. That's a 4/4 black token, and when it dies, we return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So yeah, this is incentivizing us to build this in a zombie shell, basically what the entire deck is built around. So what made me really want to go back and update this deck was the new cards we got from Commander Legends. We got 4 pretty spicy cards. We have Sphinx of the Second Sun, 6 colorless, 2 blue, Sphinx 6/6 flyer. At the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we get an additional beginning phase after this phase, so that includes another untap step, another upkeep, and another draw step. This is huge. This allows us to, first of all, untap all of our lands to, keep playing stuff, or we can eternalize a bunch on our opponent's turn, but we get an extra upkeep trigger off the Scarab God. So depending on our board state, this could just end the game in a couple of turns. We have another Sphinx, Elegith, Crossroads, Augur, 4 blue, 5/6 flyer. This is a card draw engine in our deck. If you would scry a number of cards, you draw that many cards instead. So the Scarab God would, instead of scrying, let's say 5 every single turn, we'd be draining 5, drawing 5 every single turn. So even if our opponents team up on us and try and, break our board apart, try and beat us down, we're going to be drawing so many cards to help us come back. We also have another zombie, Tormod the Desecrator, which is 1 black and 3 colorless for 4/2. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, create a tap 2/2 black zombie. This is pretty crazy. This protects us from graveyard hate. If, we get hit with a Tormod's Crypt or something and they exile a horde graveyard, we get 2/2s for each card that was exiled. Also, whenever we eternalize with the Scarab God, we get an extra 2/2 on top of the 4/4 we're getting, which is pretty crazy. And then lastly, we have Hull Breacher. This isn't, a zombie. It doesn't have any synergies. It's just a good standalone card. It's 2 colorless and blue for a 3/2 flash Merfolk Pirate. And whenever an opponent would draw a card, except the first one they would draw in their draw steps, instead we create treasure. So this just hoses on card draw engine. If your opponent's going to do a big Blue Sun Zenith, for 7, you're just going to make 7 treasure and they draw nothing. So just a staple of Commander going forward, and we're excited to play it. So now we're going to move into the high synergy cards, starting off with the Lords. These are going to be the zombies that make all of our other zombies bigger, make our board state more dominant. And also, Zombies is a pretty good tribe. It has a lot of Lords. And yeah, we picked out the best of the best. So we have Death Baron. It gives all of our zombies +1/+1 and Death Touch, so it can help stall the board. If someone's playing a big green creature deck, they're not going to want to attack in and sacrifice their creatures. We have Lord of the Accursed. It gives all of our zombies +1/+1, but we can also tap it and pay some mana to give all of our zombies Menace, to go in for an Alpha Strike. We have Undead War Chief. This gives us +2/+1, and it gives us a discount on all of our zombies, so it helps us go big and wide. And we also have Liliana's Mastery. Not a zombie, but it comes in, makes 2 zombies, and gives all of our zombies +1/+1. The absolute best zombie lord is going to be Zombie Master. It gives all of our zombies Swamp Walk, and this will win the game if we have something like Urborg. If we have Urborg, this could just start swinging in and killing people. Our whole board's unblockable. We're just going to be taking out people left and right. And then we have a pseudo lord. We have Mikaeus, the Unhallowed. This gives all of our non-human creatures +1/+1 and Undying. So this actually helps protect our board. If we get hit with a Destruction Wrath, something like a Wrath of God, our zombies are just all going to come back with a +1/+1 counter, and it gives it a lot of endurance. It also lets us do some sacrifice shenanigans, which we'll get into later. Very quickly, we have another round of Zombie Lord. We have our Sky Lord. It amasses 2, so it can give us a 2/2, and it gives all of our zombie tokens flying. These zombie token specific lords are very good in this deck because of the eternalizability from the Scarab God. And then probably the best lord in the deck is Gleaming Overseer. It can come in, give us a 1/1, but most importantly, it gives all of our zombie tokens, so everything we eternalize, hexproof and menace. So they're hard to interact with, and they're hard to block in combat. And then we also have some pseudo lords. They're not creatures or anything. We have Whip of Erebos to give us some life gain, We can gain a bunch of life by attacking in. And then we also have Wonder, which can end the game if we have it in the graveyard and we control an island. And it can let us Alpha Strike in the air out of nowhere sometimes. Continuing with our high synergy cards, these are the Zombie Matters. So these are cards, they're not lords, but they do care about having zombies. So first we have Crypt Breaker. We can pay 2 and tap it to discard a card and make a zombie. So this is good at generating zombies. Discarding a card is also relevant sometimes. If we have something big and expensive, you know, like let's say Sphinx of the Second Sun that we'd rather eternalize than cast, we can pitch it and then eternalize it after. And then we can also use this to draw cards. We can tap 3 zombies, draw a card and lose a life. So it's also a sneaky card advantage engine. We also have Undead Augur. This card's very good. It adds 2 Black Devotion, which we'll talk about later, and it replaces our zombies if they die. You know, we draw a card, lose a life, it's good. It's a solid 1-drop. That's one thing this deck is lacking a bit, is solid 1-drops, and that fits the build perfectly. Then we also have Diregraphed Colossus. This comes in with a +1/+1 counter for each zombie card in your graveyard. So if we're executing our graveyard plan really well, this is going to come in massive. And then whenever we cast a zombie spell, we put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. So this also produces tokens over time. Next we have Plague Belcher. This comes in, you have to put 2 -1/-1 counters on something. That's not that big of a deal. If you have like a zombie to just pitch, it's fine. If you have to put it on itself, that's not big of a deal. Its last ability is what we really want. Whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So we can use this for some sacrifice shenanigans, which we'll get into later. And then we also have Lich Lord of This card is surprisingly good, actually. It makes zombies over time by tapping itself to make a blue and black zombie wizard, and they can also win the game. It's very sneaky. This is a card that just sits around and kind of doesn't really do anything until we're able to start activating it and making target player lose X life and put the top X cards of their library into his or her graveyard where X is the number of zombies control. So this can also fuel our Eternalize plan. If our graveyard is kind of empty, we can start milling the opponent and taking some of their stuff. And then our Devotion Matter card is Grey Merchant of Asphodel, a staple of mono black decks in all formats, all zombie decks. Grey Merchant is the GOAT. It can just straight up end the game if we have a big enough board state. And this is a very fun card to Eternalize. Play it, sacrifice it, and then bring it back, drain again. Every deck we have in our play group has at least one way of having a way to just end the game on the spot, an infinite combo, so to speak. The zombie deck is not consistent. It takes some moving parts, but again, we like our games not dragging on forever. It's nice if everybody has a way to kind of like end the game on the spot in less obnoxious ways. I personally love playing Prosh and Food Chain. Everybody else hates it, so this is like a less obnoxious way to end the game on the spot. The combo starts, we need Gravecrawler and Rooftop Storm. So Rooftop Storm, it's a very powerful enchantment. It's really dependent if we already have cards in our hand to kind of like dump, but it makes all of our zombies cost 0 mana to cast. So that means if we have Gravecrawler in our graveyard and another zombie on the battlefield, we can cast Gravecrawler back into play 4/0 for free. So the next step is we need a good sacrifice outlet. We have Carrion Feeder. It's our most medium one. It is what it is. It's a sacrifice outlet. Free sacrifice outlet. The most exciting one is Phyrexian Altar, because this actually nets mana every single time. So we can actually make infinite mana if we have Rooftop Storm, because we're not going to be using the black mana to cast Gravecrawler, so we're going to be banking that mana every single turn, so we can use it for non-zombie spells. The way this ends the game is if we have something like Plague Belcher, Undead Augur, or even something like we didn't talk about earlier, Diregraph Captain, things that have draining effects whenever a zombie dies. If we can just loop this, where we're just sacking Gravecrawler, casting for free, sacking it, and then draining, we're going to win the game on the spot. And then we can get infinite cards if we have something like Cringer Dominance on Zombie. So every time we cast the Gravecrawler back into play, we're going to draw a card. So this lets us draw infinite cards, drain infinite. The most nut draw scenario we can have is like Gravecrawler into like Undead Augur and then Phyrexian Altar. That's our nut draw. We would basically like, play Phyrexian Altar, and then we would just sacrifice Gravecrawler, make a black mana, cast it, and then that whole time we're draining with Undead Augur. We can do this as early as turn 3. This is our absolute nut draw. And like I said, our playgroup likes having a way of all of our decks to be able to end the game on the spot. Prussian Food Chain's a good example. We have, Suan likes to ultimate a million planeswalkers. It's not like an I win card, but ultimating like 6 planeswalkers in like automatically that's to basically win the game. So this is our way of ending the game on the spot if we're stalling and being able to sneak out a win out of nowhere. So these new cards from Commander Legends are actually going to be some of the most powerful cards in the deck. So we're going to go on ways to tutor them up and make sure we see them every game. So first we have Corpse Connoisseur. It enters the battlefield. It tutors a creature straight into our graveyard that we can internalize later. And we can double down on this, and instead of unearthing it, we can just eternalize it for a more permanent effect. We also have Sidisi, Undead Vizier. It can come in, exploit another creature, like a zombie token we have lying around, or itself even, and we can tutor up any card straight into our hand. If we exploit herself, this is pretty cool, because then we can just exploit it again. Like, we can just eternalize it, exploit another creature, do the tutor all over again. And then we have Buried Alive, which is probably the best of these effects. 3 mana, goes and gets any 3 creatures. So, you know, if we need a creature for interaction, a lord, a value engine, we can just go get one of each, put them straight into the graveyard. And then we also have Entomb, which is the most efficient version. Just 1 mana sorcery, any card we need, any creature straight into the... Next up, we have our interaction. For removal, we have Deadly Rollick. This is a new card from the other new Commander starter set. This card's pretty insane. It can exile, which is always a good effect you want. But if we control our commander, we can do it for free. We have Price of Fame, another very good card. It gets discounted if we're targeting a legendary creature, which commanders are everywhere. And then we can also Surveil 2 to help dig through our deck, get our engine going. We have Feed the Swarm for some main deck enchantment removal. We have to lose Life Evil to its mana cost, but being able to, you know, remove something like a Zendikar, Resurgent, very, very powerful for this deck to have. We have Murderous Rider for targeted removal, and then it can also, you know, add to our zombie synergies. We have Helldozer to help go after non-basic lands, so things like opposing Cabal Coffers, Nykthos trying to nick, stuff like that. We have Overseer of the Damned to come in and, you know, kill something if we can eternalize it. We have Fleshbag Marauder to help against Voltron strategies by making them sacrifice. And then we also have Lazotep Plating to protect our whole board in a pinch if we need it. Sometimes that's kind of like the game plan. Somebody needs to wipe the board and stop our deck. If we're able to just nullify that one time and then do a big drain upkeep, we'll be so far ahead that it's definitely worth putting in the deck. Moving along, we also have our Mana Ramp package. We have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, and Talisman of Dominance. No matter what your deck's doing, early ramp is always good. Make sure you don't fall behind. And then we also have Bontu's Monument. Not necessarily ramp, but it does discount all of our black creatures, which are most of our creatures. And it has a nice drain effect, which has combo potential, which we'll talk about later. Next, we have our Mass Token Generators. These are like card for card, kind of our most explosive plays in the whole deck. We have Army of the Damned. It can come in, make 13 zombie tokens, and then we can flash it back later for another 13. So this can just like end the game if we're able to have a good upkeep trigger with the Scarab God. We also have Josu Vess. If we can kick it, it can come in with 8 black zombie creature tokens with Menace, so they can actually threaten the board, the opponent's life total, if we're not draining them. And then on the lower end of the spectrum, we have Newscraft Mob. This creates a lot of tokens over time, especially if our opponents are just like, you know, chaining spells, like going out. We're going to make a lot of tokens right away. What I like about this is if we eternalize it, it actually comes in with base power and toughness 4. So it actually comes in as a 9/9. And then even when they remove all 5 counters by casting things, we'll still end up with a 4/4, which is pretty solid. And then we also have Grave Titan, staple of Commander for years. Not super explosive, but over time, it will make a massive zombie army. To help turbocharge the deck, we do have a couple of wheel effects. We have Windfall. Each player discards their hand, and then we draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. This is pretty sweet. I've seen it be devastating in our play group already. Opponent just finished tutoring, or, you know, they kept a really good hand. They've been building for this big, expensive play, and then we just wipe it all away. And then they have to kind of rebuild all over again. And then Ancient Excavation, same thing. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in our hand, and then we discard a card for each. This one actually gives us more selection. And if we don't really need it, we can cycle it for 2 for a basic land. And then we also have Frantic Search. This can let us draw 2, discard 2, which is fine. Like, drawing cards and immediately putting them in the graveyard can sometimes be better than having them in our hand. But we can also untap 3 lands. So it pays for itself, but then this can give us an explosive turn. If we have like a Nykthos that we can like tap for a bunch of mana, and then play Frantic Search off of some of that mana, and then untap Nykthos to do it all over again, or even Cabal Coffers, we can generate like ridiculous amounts of mana. And then at that point, we're casting some of our haymakers like Army of the Damned, or we're just going off, eternalizing multiple things that turn. Solid. Very, very sneaky card in this deck. The last kind of small category we have is mass reanimation. The deck's pretty good at reanimating things with the commander. We're just eternalizing all day, every day. But we do have a couple spells that let us, return a bunch of things. We have Rot Hulk. This is a new card, relatively new. And yeah, it can come in and bring back a bunch of zombies that are in our graveyard. Very explosive. Great if we have like a million zombies in the graveyard. We can like play it, then like sack it, and then eternalize it and get even more zombies. And then we also have Agadeem's Awakening hiding out in the sideboard. This is kind of like a Hail Mary. If we're kind of behind and we're not really drawing action, this gives us some extra oomph in the mana base. We can come into a turn where we're drawing blanks, and then that might just be enough to help us reboard a build state after maybe like a bad wrath, or like maybe get ahead if we're falling a bit behind. Just good value to have in the mana base. So the last kind of category we have is what I just called the rest of the curve. These are good standalone cards. They help round out the deck, but they don't fall into any specific category. At 1 mana, we have Citrus Supplier. It just comes in as an early zombie, puts cards in our graveyard, gets the thing going. Solid early play. Then the deck, as we said, really needs some good 2-drops, and so we play Lazov the Multifarious. It's not a zombie itself, but it can come in. It can utilize the graveyard. We can, turn it into things that are in our graveyard. Good, solid 2-drop. We have Withered Wretch. Some nice graveyard hate. It's relevant most of the time. A lot of decks have some graveyard value, and having it on your 2-drop's fine. This is also pretty good with Tormod the Desecrator. It makes kind of like this weird bootleg Scarab God, where if they manage to answer our Scarab God, and we can't really like get it going again, if we have this and Tormod, we can pay 1 mana, exile a card from our graveyard, and then we can make a 2/2 tapped. So just a very weak, but still decent engine that we can have if we need it for a backup plan. Then we have Tomebound Lich. This is just a good 3-drop, good value. It loots. It has lifelink, it has death touch, so it's good to come back as a 4/4 and it can start doing things in combat. We also have Vindictive Lich. This card I really like, especially if we can sacrifice it and start using a lot of its modes. Yeah, when it dies, we can make target opponent sacrifice a creature, again, to answer some Voltron shenanigans. Target opponent discards 2 cards, so we can go after somebody's hand. Or, if we're trying to close out the game desperately, we can make someone lose 5 life. Next, we also have Vizier of Many Faces. This is a card I didn't see in a lot of lists online, but this is a card I've been playing since I've been playing this deck. It's just fun. It can embalm itself, so it can come back from the graveyard. It works very natural with our graveyard synergies. And then being able to like just copy extra things, it's nice. Copy a Grey Merchant, copy, anything with a good enter the battlefield ability. It's solid. Then we have Consuming Aberration. It's a standalone threat that can also start really turning through the opponent's library and spilling into the graveyard, so then we can start going after their stuff, because it's always good to internalize their creatures, because it doesn't matter that the opponents aren't playing zombie decks. Everything we're taking is going to become a zombie. It's going to become part of our horde, and it's going to help fuel our upkeep trigger. We also have Awaken the Ertswile. This is a fun kind of card. If we're on a pretty good board state, we can put everybody on neutral terms. Everybody discards their hand. We all get zombies. Our zombies are significantly better. We have lords. We have an upkeep trigger from the Scarab God, and then we're in a better position to be top decking because we're going to be scrying every single turn. And then we also have Bontu, the God Eternal. This is kind of like a weird pseudo card advantage thing. It comes down. It cycles kind of whatever we have. So we have a bunch of like lackluster creatures like a Citrus Supplier that's just hanging around, or some 2/2s. We can just cycle them to turn them into cards to help, fuel our endgame. And then lastly, we have our Liliana Planeswalker, the new one from M21. It's a pretty good card. It removes based on how many zombies we have. Good +1, good ultimate, solid card. That's going to be it for our first deck guide on Fellowship Games. Let us know what you think of it. If you guys want us to make some more, we worked really hard, and yeah, just let us know what you think. Make sure to check out our website for the full deck list. I wrote a brief article there. The link's in the bio. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks again for watching and joining the Fellowship.